Hi guys, it's me, Like God. I've got all my Cygnar October releases now. They arrived yesterday from the Outpost. So I figured I'd do model reviews for them. But I figured I'd do something a bit different this time rather than just looking at the model itself and the sculpt. I thought I'd compare them to their equivalents or similar sculpts in the Cygnar line from the past and see how they compare up. So I've got my cup of tea and I'll get opening them. So we'll start off with the best one, the patrol dog. Now, the immediate thing that jumps out at me is this is all one piece, which is fantastic for such a small model. The other thing that I'm immediately aware of is he's metal. I've seen other people get theirs and they've been resin. I think this is because I'm in the UK and it's easier for Privateer Press to just make a lot of these models metal in the UK rather than importing the resin ones because they make metal models here in the UK. It's not a big deal. He's very, very well detailed and there's next to no mold lines on him. I can't spot any. He really is a lovely, lovely little model and such a good boy. Really looking forward to putting this guy in my lists. He is really cheap, so he will be in a lot of lists. Overall, really happy with the patrol dog. Good sculpt. So next I'll move on to Commander Anson Hitch, which is the kind of utility officer solo. Comes with a little sword. Attaches via a small peg. A bit hard to see. Shouldn't be too hard to attach that. I'm probably not going to bother pinning it. I usually pin everything, but that should be alright not to pin. So, Anson Hitch. Very nicely detailed sculpt. Very nice. Nice non-combat pose for a utility officer. Unfortunately though, very nasty mold line down the Cygnus side of his head, onto his hat, and up the other side. It's going to take a lot of filing to get that out. Not amazingly too pleased with that, but you put in the work, the model will look better. But to have the mold line straight across the Cygnus is a bit of a pain. There you go. You can see it now. Again, apologies for low quality of camera. I am recording this on my phone. I don't have the fancy setups some channels do. If I can upgrade at some point, I will. So the Trencher Lieutenant Warcaster, or basically Trencher Junior as most people call him. Again, this is one that I've seen and people have been getting in resin. Mine is metal. Again, I'm not overly worried about that, but it's a bit different. He is really nice and detailed. There's a lot of battle damage on his armour. See if I can get it to focus in. There you go. See up on his shoulder pads. Nice bits of battle damage. So that'll be nice to paint with some nice little chipped effects. His arcane turbine is fairly big compared to all the other juniors, and it's got his bedroll and his entrenching spade, and then he has a trench knife and the same carbine that Trencher Commandos have. So the easy compare with the Trencher Junior is regular Junior. And how do they stack up height-wise? Trencher Junior is a little bit taller, but he's a tougher guy. I would expect him to be a bit taller. He is slightly on the large side in terms of scale if I put him next to a regular trencher. He is quite a bit taller, but then again that trencher is kind of slouched a bit forward aiming. But again, he is a bigger model. But as a solo, that's not too bad because you would like to be able to pick him out of the battlefield to find him. And here he is with the other Cygnar Juniors for a family shot. Overall, really impressed with his sculpt. He looks really nice. I think he'll be a joy to paint up. Now I'll move on to Siege. So Siege comes in quite a few pieces. You've got his main body, and there's quite a bit of flashing to be removed from him, and some mould lines, but because he's mainly armoured and the armour plates are fairly easy to file down, it's not such a big deal. There's some, see if I can get it to focus. There's some really bad flashing around the smokestacks there. But otherwise not too bad. He's got a really nice hammer. I've seen some nice conversions already where people are doing ones where he's flying on some smoke plumes. Not sure exactly if I'm going to bother to go on with that, but... And his tiny little head, which will definitely be getting pinned because I really don't want it coming off in a match and me losing him. So here's Siege 1 for scale comparison. So he's quite a bit bigger, but he's in chunky armour. Now, back when he was teased in a no quarter where they just showed the image of him stood in his armour with his face blurred out, I kind of guessed that it was Siege based on this shoulder piece and the rocket pods on the ammo on the shoulder. So if you look at Siege 1, his shoulder piece here is very similar. It's got those vertical lines, and he also carries things on his shoulder. So it seemed very, very similar. So I figured it's probably Siege. Plus you could see the very tippy tops of the jetpacks, which looked so much like Minuteman jetpacks. I thought, well, it's got to be Cygnar. And then also there was a picture of his maul. So I was like, that's definitely Siege 2. And it turned out I was right. He also comes with his little buddy, a rocket turret. And this just comes in 3 pieces. So these two go together, and then this one pops on top. Not much to say about this one. It's nicely detailed for the size of the thing and what it is. I think it'll be very quick to paint up. Bit of metal flashing to remove. Mould lines are pretty much non-existent on this one, but the flashing at induction points for the metal is the only problem. So now on to the big boys. Trencher long gunners. Now again, these are another one that I've seen people get the bodies in resin, mine are all metal. I'm not too bothered about that. It doesn't really worry me. What is slightly concerning is the amount of pieces they're in. All of the shoulder pads for the grunts. You've got one shoulder pad for one side, one for the other with the trench knife attached. I see the trench knife shoulder pad as a blessing and a curse. It's annoying that I have to attach it, but it's not as bad as the unit of Trencher Commandos I assembled years ago, where all the little knives are separate little pieces that you have to glue onto the shoulder pad by a tiny little nubbin, and they're really easy for them to pop off. So we'll start with the 2 unique sculpts, because there's 3 of each type of grunt, the unit leader and the command attachment. I've seen a lot of debate online as to which is the unit leader and which is the command attachment. I personally think that the one with the spyglass is the unit leader, and the one with his hand held up and the rifle held in the air is the command attachment. I have a reason for that. The reason is, if you look on this guy's shoulder, you should be able to see, if I can get it to focus, 2 chevrons, which means he's a lieutenant. There they are. Just on the little lower armour portion, not up on the big rounded shoulder pad, which indicate he is a lieutenant. So I'm going to be using this one as the command attachment. Nicely detailed models. Conspicuously missing spades, and that is because this unit does not have the digging action, which I think is nice. I think it's good that they didn't put the spades, because it would confuse things a little. I think now there's only 1 trencher model that has a spade. No, 2 trencher models that have spades that can't dig in, and that's Maxwell Finn and the Trencher Master Gunner, because they lost that action. His head comes separate, which is a little bit annoying, but you know, I'll pin that. That shouldn't be too much of an issue. So we've got the unit leader. Both his arms are separate. He is a nice, beautiful sculpt. Again, everything's nice and consistent throughout the trencher line. Pouches, ammo belts, bandoliers, the little loincloth part that they tend to have, the armour that they have, the knee pads, the helmets, the elbow bracer kind of deals, they're all the same across the whole trencher line, which is really nice to have the continuity. So there's 3 separate grunt types, like I said before. You've got this guy that's aiming a rifle. You've got this one, which I think personally looks like a woman, which, if I'm right, that'll be the first female trencher sculpt. I can't be 100% sure, because Privateer Press, with their grunts in units, they don't tend to overly sexualise models. They tend to be wearing the same armour as their male counterparts, which I think is really good. So could be male, could be female. Does it matter? Not really. I think it'd be quite nice if it was a female model, but I guess I'd have to ask the sculptor or somebody at Privateer Press. So this one's kind of walking forward a little bit, kind of pose, with the rifle not held up. And then we have this crouching, aiming kind of guy. I have dry fitted all of these with their shoulder pads before I turned on the camera, and all of them that are aiming can see past their shoulder pads, though their shoulder pads do obscure part of their heads. I think this is quite a nice detail, because it kind of makes it look like the shoulder pad is being used for its primary purpose, which is to protect them. Now this one I've picked out in particular because if you look at the bottom of the straps on that backpack, you can see the metal kind of juts off from the bottom of the straps into the cape, which is a bit of a miscast, which is a bit unfortunate. I'm going to have to carve that away and file it until it's clean, because I can't paint it like that, it would look terrible. It's a bit unfortunate, but not the end of the world. When it comes to the hands and holding the guns, there's three different sculpts. There's three different sculpts of the hands being held, holding the guns. And at first I was trying to figure out which goes with which. Now, the running or advancing pose is fairly easy. It couldn't be either of the other two. But the other two sculpts are very, very similar. Very similar. In fact, there is only a small amount of difference, the length of the arm, but the easiest way to tell them apart is this one has a squared peg in it, hole, not peg, and this one has a rounded one. And they correspond with the standing guy has a round nub on his arm, and the crouching guy has a square. So if you're assembling these and you're confused as to which goes where, there's your answer. So the shoulder pads all being separate. It's going to be a lot more cleanup, it's going to be a lot more assembly, but hopefully they should look good at the end. So I'm going to compare them to their various counterparts in the game. So these little abominations are original, normal, non-trencher long gunners. Now, from the off, trencher long gunners are taller, but they are stronger, tougher people, better armoured. That makes sense. The gun. How different is the gun? Now, in the no quarter that I reviewed recently, it does mention that the gun is different. It's redesigned for trenchers in mind, so it does make sense that it's different. It's actually shorter, and the trencher one has bands along the length of it. But the firing mechanism and the ammo wheel are all very similar. So that's pretty good. And unlike these guys who can't seem to be able to put a stock in their shoulder, trencher long gunners are slightly better at that. The gun goes up in the shoulder there. I mean, it's still not fully shouldered, but it's better than these guys. I think this one is a good example of really bad miscasting in these old models. You see just there, where the shoulder meets the gun, there's just a brown blob. That, when I first got it, was just a pitted mass of miscast metal, and I had to carve it back, and I figured if I just paint it brown, the same as his uniform, people wouldn't really be able to tell. And seeing as he's one grunt in a unit of 10, I'm not overly worried. It's not like these guys see the table very often anyway. But it's the same as the bits on the backpack there. It's just something that you can either try and fix or just live with. The long gunner officer doesn't look anywhere near as grisly as the trencher officer. This one looks like he's got a lot more pomp and flair about him, with his fancy gold bits and his fancy hat. So trencher long gunners seem a bit more like real men, and Private Press seems to have really gone off adding standard bearers to units, especially seeing as they don't serve the same purpose as they used to back in the olden days. So how do trencher long gunners fare against their trencher counterparts? So I've got a trencher commando and a Trencher infantryman, and they compare pretty respectably. They're slightly taller, so there's a bit of scale creep, but they're very, very similar in style. Like I said, they've been fairly consistent with the armour. You can see that all of the knee pads and the arm braces and the chest pieces of armour, they're all very similar throughout the entire line, which is very nice. It makes for a really cohesive looking army when they're all done together. So assembling these guys is going to be a bit of a pain, but overall, with anything in this hobby, the time you put in is what you get back from the finished product when you've got it. So I think that although it will take me longer, I'll be happy, and once they're done, it's all good. Overall, the one that I'm most impressed with is the Trench Dog. He is my favourite of the new models. Next would probably be the Trencher Junior, just because it's a really nice sculpt. My least favourite is Hitch, just mainly because of those terrible mould lines. Otherwise he'd probably be rated a lot higher because of the detail of the sculpt and the fact that I like the fact that he's just stood there commanding like an officer does. Siege is a bit of an anomaly because he's although he's attached with the trenchers, fluff wise and game wise, he doesn't look anything like them, which is a bit sad. But also I'm gonna have to figure out how I'm gonna choose to assemble him and paint him, because I'm not sure if I'm going to keep the stock pose or if I'm going to convert him. So that's my unboxing and thoughts and review of these models. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, do all the YouTube things, like, subscribe, comment, all that sort of stuff. I will likely be doing another one of these with the November Trencher releases. The Trencher engineers, mechanics, the Express Crew, which is the Trollkin with a huge gun, the Blockhouse, and the Trencher Commandos unit attachment, or command attachment I should say. These guys have been waiting for him for some time. I'm a little sad because I'd like to be using Trencher Commandos in my lists right now, but I'm restricting myself to only playing painted models, so I can't use them without the command attachment, and that makes me sad. So I'm not going to use them until he comes out. Alright guys, catch you later.